golden scales along his forehead and jawline. His eyes narrowed, and his face became implacable as he once again gestured at the board. Tate huffed, conceding the staring contest, and examined the board more closely. She recognized the symbols, at least. Looked like he wanted her to call fire, because nothing said, "Good idea," like calling a fire elemental indoors when things like books and buildings could go up in flames. "You want me to summon fire," Tate said, making her words a statement rather than the question that would invite more reprimands. "And if you could do it today, I'd be especially pleased." He turned and headed to the front of the room. Tate stood and followed across the glassy floor. The entire room looked as though someone had melted rock and then supercooled it to create a perfectly unmarred surface with an obsidian-like sheen. Someone had etched a circle into the ground. Chalk symbols were drawn at the 4 directions, north, south, east, west, and it was within this circle that Tate stopped. It was the only break in the floor's surface, and it acted as a containment field in case a student's spell got out of control. Tate hadn't needed one yet, as she'd proven an utter failure at any sort of magic. The rest of the class stared back in varying degrees of amusement, derision, or boredom. Most of them had waited years to be accepted into Dyske's class. He was considered one of the elite in his field and had a gift for bringing out the maximum magical potential in his students. The rest of the class had parents who were willing to pay an obscene amount of money to be pushed to the front of the line. It didn't help that Tate was years older than the rest. The oldest here was only 20 to Tate's mid-20s. At least, Tate thought she looked like she was in her 20s. Who really knew? She certainly didn't. She had no memories prior to waking up in a glass cylinder a little over a year ago. Her age, among many other things, remained a mystery. About the only thing she knew was that she was bonded to a dragon named Illith, and her real name was Tatum Allegra Winters. The name was familiar, so she assumed it was hers, though she kept that to herself. Most knew her as Tate Fisher. Tate let her mind wander as she worked on putting herself in a near-meditative state. Thinking of nothing was a lot harder than it sounded. The only way she could achieve the state was by thinking through everything bothering her before forcing those thoughts to quiet. The point of this exercise, as far as Tate understood, was to reach into the next world and grab a being they called an elemental and bring it into this world. Illith tended to call this space the Between, though Tate had never heard Dysk refer to it as such. Tate had yet to figure out how this could be done. For the others in the class, it seemed to come easy. They closed their eyes, held out their hands, and then an elemental appeared. Most were usually small, but in a few rare cases, the summoned element had taken up all extra room in the circle. Dysk had been very impressed. Distantly, she heard the classroom door open, and 2 pairs of feet, one in boots and one not, pad along the edge of the classroom. She discarded the distraction, turning her focus inward. Her conscience dipped abruptly, as if it was floating on a string, and someone had given it a sharp tug. A hint of heat sparked at the edge of her perception, and her focus narrowed on it. Her forward progress halted, as if she'd hit an invisible force, and the hint of heat darted away. So close. She opened her eyes and shook her head at Dysk. He frowned at her. "Try again." Someone smothered a giggle in the back. Tate looked at the rest of the students, but couldn't figure out who'd laughed. Her eyes snagged on her friends. Dewdrop, a former pickpocket who'd somehow attached himself to Tate, and Night, a creature she'd met in the tunnels earlier this year. Nobody had a name for what he was, but Tate tended to refer to him as a bearcat.